Welcome back to a brand new episode of Gen Z BTC. It's me, Satoshi Guapamoto, and today we're going to go over how this tiny little company, MicroStrategy, has come out of nowhere and completely destroyed all 500 of the companies in the S&P 500, and how it's going to continue to do that because they have infinite money, an asset that has no ceiling, and the fact that no one can catch them ever because they're selling volatility as a product and short sellers are losing, crying, and coping. Let's start here. MicroStrategy has completely bodied all 500 of the companies in the S&P 500 with its returns over the last 4 years and over this past year to date. They are destroying every single company in the S&P 500. No company has gone up as much percentage-wise in the S&P than MicroStrategy has done. Okay, they're up almost 200%. They've added billions to their market cap while diluting shareholders. How is this possible? Well, it's because MicroStrategy has infinite money and they have an asset with an infinite ceiling. All right. How does MicroStrategy generate so much capital? How do they get so much income? Long story short, MicroStrategy issues debt to buy Bitcoin. They issue convertible bonds, which are essentially bonds that give you none of the downside of Bitcoin and half of the upside, right? So people who are risk adverse are able to buy these convertible bonds and later convert them into a Bitcoin adjacent security like MicroStrategy if Bitcoin appreciates in price. And if Bitcoin goes down in price, well, they don't have that downside volatility because the bond gives them a yield of around 1%. So they're protected on the downside, right? So they're issuing convertible bonds and they're just taking on debt in other ways. They're essentially acquiring debt, acquiring US dollars to then buy BTC. Now, why does Bitcoin have no ceiling? Well, because paper dollars have no bottom. Now, Bitcoin has a limited supply, which means that no matter how much the demand goes up, the supply is inelastic, meaning there cannot be any more Bitcoin created, right? The law of supply and demand, if demand's going up, you have to provide some more supply to the market, right? In order to meet the demand. You cannot do that with Bitcoin. It's the only thing of its kind, right? If strawberries started selling for $5,000 a strawberry, you better bet I'd figure out how to grow some strawberries in my backyard. Okay, I don't care what it takes. $5,000 a strawberry, I'm going to increase the supply to meet that demand. You can't grow any more Bitcoin, you can't find anymore, you can't mine anymore, and you can't make anymore. So the price can go up, but the demand will still never be quenched, right? Bitcoin has no ceiling because fiat has no bottom. You can never determine how much fiat will be printed. How much will the deficit be for the United States? How much debt will the world take on? You can't know. There is no bottom for the amount of debt that the world can go into. They can continue printing and printing and printing and printing until people eventually revolt because the economies start to fall apart, right? So Bitcoin has no ceiling. MicroStrategy is 150% Bitcoin, which means MicroStrategy has no ceiling. They have an infinite amount of money. They have an infinite amount of capital. Furthermore, they can continue to borrow from this debt-based system that continues to print and print money, which actually deflates their debt away. They're inflating the debt away. When you take on debt in the weak currency and they start printing more and more money, the value of your debt is actually decreasing. So in a way, you owe less money. All right. I've already talked about this in another video. It's a little bit complicated, but look up the Japanese carry trade. Look up how George Soros got rich. Those two things alone will be able to explain essentially what's happening here. This is a speculative attack on the entire S&P 500 because the S&P 500 is denominated in dollars. MicroStrategy is performing a speculative attack on every company in the United States and on the US dollar at the same time. So MicroStrategy buys Bitcoin with the debt that they issue. Bitcoin goes up in value because they just bought more of it, which then makes MicroStrategy stock go up, which means that they can issue equity in the form of share announcements, right? Bitcoin becomes an accretive asset on their balance sheet. Bitcoin creates this flywheel where essentially the value of Bitcoin going up means the value of MicroStrategy goes up, which means the more debt they can take on to buy more Bitcoin. This cycle continues, and people who have to buy bonds, right? People who are in the fixed income market, insurance companies, pension funds, all these different funds that have to buy bonds or buy fixed assets, they want to buy a bond backed by Bitcoin. They're buying MicroStrategy's bonds. This is the best bond that you can buy. That's why they've issued billions of dollars in convertible notes, and the market keeps buying them up. And the market likes when they issue more notes because they know that accretively they're going to increase their Bitcoin per share, which means that they're going to increase their stock price, which means they can issue more notes for them to buy and make a good return on, right? So Michael Saylor said it himself. Essentially, what they're doing is they're taking crude oil, right, which is the Bitcoin, the very volatile, diverse thing. MicroStrategy is the foundry that's going to condense and package the crude oil into different products. And on the other side of that comes things like oil. They're creating kerosene. They're creating nail polish. Essentially, they're creating lower volatility instruments, right? They're creating convertible notes. They're allowing people to short the stock if they'd like. They're allowing people to go long in the stock. They're creating all these derivatives, right? They're taking Bitcoin and they're creating derivatives. And whatever people want to use, they can choose to use. If you want to short the stock and you don't want to short Bitcoin, then you can short MicroStrategy because it's Bitcoin adjacent, right? If you want to hold Bitcoin, but because of the way that your institution is set up, maybe you can't hold Bitcoin due to the laws, you can hold MicroStrategy because it's a security that is adjacent to Bitcoin. All right. Now, who can catch MicroStrategy? Well, the answer is no one. No one on earth can catch MicroStrategy. Why is that? MicroStrategy is 150% Bitcoin. So essentially, they have about 15 billion in Bitcoin holdings, but the company's worth, 45 billion, right? We'll just call it 45 billion. Nobody can catch them. 35 billion. That's a little bit closer to the correct number. Because they are using debt to leverage the Bitcoin, their company is 150% BTC. Now, if a large super company like Apple or Google were to come and they were to buy 100 billion of Bitcoin, right? Technically, they would have a larger holding than MicroStrategy, but percentage-wise, if they did that, they would only have about 10% of their company be Bitcoin, and the other 90% is still Google. The other 90% is still Apple. The other 90% is still tied up in whatever other equity that they have in the company, whatever other assets that the company has tied up, whatever technology that they're issuing, right? That still holds a huge amount of their value. MicroStrategy has an underlying software business. However, the business itself is levered almost 2-to-1 when it comes to Bitcoin. So as a percentage of the company, nobody can catch MicroStrategy. They are 150% levered, right? They're 150% Bitcoin. All right. They're using debt to take on more Bitcoin upside. Nobody can catch them percentage wise. Volatility as a product. This is what I talked about a little bit earlier when it comes to condensing Bitcoin and turning it into a vehicle for people to get access to the Bitcoin network. Some people want to short Bitcoin, so what they'll do is they'll short MicroStrategy. Perhaps they want to go long, so they'll buy options, they'll buy calls. MicroStrategy has an extremely deep options market. The amount of liquidity in the MicroStrategy stock is insanely huge, which gives investors more confidence that they're going to be able to get into the market, buy and sell when they like, always have a diverse and open and active market when it comes to these different derivatives and financial strategies, right? Whether that's buying bonds, whether that's going short, whether that's selling cash secured puts, whether that's selling cash secured calls, right? Covered calls. And then finally, short sellers, right? Again, since volatility is being sold as a product, if you don't want to short Bitcoin itself as a commodity, maybe your fund or your hedge fund or your institution is not able to short Bitcoin, you can now short a security and you can short MicroStrategy. Because if you don't like Bitcoin, then you don't like MicroStrategy. They're 150% Bitcoin. So if you think that this is going to blow up in their face and that they're complete idiots and that Bitcoin has no utility and no value, then you will short MicroStrategy. And what will happen is you're going to short them. And in the long run, you're going to cry because you're going to have no money left. You're going to go completely broke because what you're doing is you're shorting something that has a finite amount, right? You're shorting something that can never be printed further than what exists today, right? So shorting Bitcoin really is truly insane. But some people love to gamble. But once they get burned, then they try asking the casino for their money back, and that's just not how it works. And MicroStrategy understands this. Michael Saylor is literally telling people, hey, I want you to actively short my stock because I'm never selling Bitcoin because I own something that is way too hard for any other person to get in between. You know what I mean? There's no way to stop the train that is Bitcoin because there's no way to stop governments from inflating money away. There's no way to stop them from printing. So Shorting Bitcoin is a loser's game. Shorting MicroStrategy is even worse because they're 150% Bitcoin. So you're basically shorting Bitcoin with 2 to 3 times leverage. And some people will try it. Some people will do it. There's already been a couple of hedge funds who have gotten completely burned with this strategy, which has made MicroStrategy even more money, which then allows them to buy more Bitcoin, which then makes their stock price go up even further. So this is a reflexive flywheel that has allowed MicroStrategy to body all 500, not 499, 500 of the 500 companies in the S&P have been completely destroyed by a software company that basically does nothing except buy Bitcoin and go into debt to buy more Bitcoin. They're going into debt to buy the most rare thing on the planet. And because everybody wants the rare thing, everyone else who doesn't own it, the other 500 people, they're losing. Okay? Bitcoin is more rare than high-level computer chips, which is why NVIDIA cannot catch them. Bitcoin is way more rare than any tech that Apple can create, which is why Apple cannot catch these guys. This is way more rare than anything Google can create because they cannot catch these guys, okay? They have a lot of utility. There's a lot of value there in the software business and in the silicon industry, but there's nothing that can stop Bitcoin because there's always another company that can make a better piece of technology. You can always get better at mass producing the current best AI chip. And in 10 years, that AI chip will be completely obsolete. That'll be irrelevant. An iPhone from 10 years ago sucks. All right. A CPU or a GPU from 10 years ago today, it sucks. All right. 10 years from now, there's still going to be the same amount of Bitcoin. So there's no way to catch somebody who already has 1% of the supply, as the demand and the value of Bitcoin continues to go up forever and the supply remains the same. If you enjoyed that video, then please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share it with someone if you want them to also prepare for what MicroStrategy is going to do, which is transform the finance industry and digitize the financial markets forever. This is one of the greatest trades of our time. Okay, Warren Buffett had a great trade with Berkshire Hathaway. George Soros had a great trade by selling the weak currency to buy the strong currency. This is the greatest trade of all time. And we're watching it materialize right now. This is going to change all financial markets. Okay, this is not just the best trade of all time. This is the transformative trade. This is the most transformative trade ever. All right. And if you don't believe that, then I need you to come back to this video. Come back to this video in 1 year. Come back to this video in 1 year, and then we'll see. We'll see exactly how transformative it was. But until then, I appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Make sure that you keep stacking sats or die trying.